In this video I paint 3 versions of the same Hell Knight model from Trench Crusade, each forged in a different metallic vision of infernal might. Dark steel, cold blue steel, and cursed gold. Hell Knights are the tormented champions of the court of the Seven Headed Serpent, fallen beings bound in tomb-like armour, their divine forms twisted into a prison of metal and madness. Once exalted, now monstrous, they march as enforcers of a nobility that hunts mortals for sport. Each version reflects a different aspect of their fall: weathered steel for cold vengeance, blue steel for cursed nobility, and gold for corrupted glory. 3 metals, 1 damned soul. Welcome to the Dark Forge. Hey guys, welcome back. As I mentioned in the intro, I'm going to be painting up some Hell Knights, which was the winner of the Patreon voted video for this month. And I thought I would dry brush up 3 different versions of metallics, just to show you how easy and effective dry brushing metallics can be, with very minimal effort and achieved with only a couple of steps. And to start the process off, I'm going to prime all 3 of the models with some Green Stuff World matte black primer. And for the first model, I'm going to be painting up a dark black metallic. And to achieve this, I'm going to be using a combination of Army Painter Heavy Metal and Gun Metal. But in reality, any combination of a dark silver and slightly lighter silver would do, staying clear of any of the brighter metallics and just sticking to the darker ones. And the process itself is fairly simple. All I do is load up my dry brush with the heavy metal and wipe away all of the excess onto a dry brush palette, and then just dry brushing this onto the model very lightly at first, and then building up the pressure I'm applying until I get the coverage that I'm looking for. And for the most part, I'm using up and down strokes rather than a circular motion, and this helps to catch more of the top and upward facing surfaces, while still leaving all of the recesses and lower parts still in the black primer. And I'm then going to move on to the slightly lighter silver colour, which in my case was some Army Painter Gun Metal, and just repeat the process, only this time applying slightly less paint on the brush and reducing the amount of pressure being applied. And again with this, just trying to focus on more downward strokes and only using side to side strokes when I need to get into a tight area or highlight a vertical raised area. And as I mentioned before, by applying it this way, most of the paint should be getting deposited on the upward facing surfaces, while leaving all of the recesses still darkened. And that's the dark silver metallic completed. It maybe takes about 5 minutes in total, if that, and produces a really nicely highlighted and shaded dark steel with almost zero effort. And now moving on to the blue steel version, I'm going to follow a very similar process for the start, only this time I'm going to be using much brighter colours, starting with Army Painter Plate Mail Metal, and then working my way up to some Army Painter Shining Silver. starting with the plate mail metal, which is the slightly darker colour, applying it via a dry brush with downward strokes until I've covered all areas, and then moving on to the brighter shining silver and repeating the process, just with slightly less paint on the brush and again with some slightly lighter pressure being applied. And this should leave you a similarly shaded and highlighted model to the dark steel, only much brighter. Again, a very simple process and can be achieved within a matter of minutes. However, I'm going to push this slightly further and try and give it a nice blue tint. And to do that, I'm going to be using some Vallejo Express Omega Blue, which is a nice dark blue contrast paint. And I'm going to be thinning this down 50-50 with some water, and just applying this all over the silver metallics. And this should just flow into all of the recesses, and also tint the entire model in a blue shade. And at this point the model might be looking a little bit messy, but don't worry, we're going to fix that up in a second. And once the contrast paint had fully dried, I then just come back in with the same Army Painter Shining Silver, which was the brighter of the two colours, and just reapply the dry brush in the same way as before. And this should just re-establish all of the silver highlights, leaving that nice blue tint still visible in some of the recesses. And that's the second version of the metallics now complete. It was a couple of extra steps, but in the end provides a really nice and shiny metallic with a subtle blue tint throughout. And for the gold version of the model, I'm going to be using Army Painter Emperor Gold and Greedy Gold. But again, any combination of a really dark gold and a slightly brighter gold would do here. And I'm just using the same application method here, using a dry brush with downward strokes, working my way around the entire model. And at this stage I had only applied the darker Emperor Gold, and to be honest, I think this looks really good for only being one coat of a single colour, and you could just leave it like this if you were happy with it, but I'm going to push it a little bit further and apply the second dry brush layer of the Greedy Gold, which will give a much nicer bright looking gold. I'm then going to take this a little bit further and use some of the Army Painter plate mail metal that I used for the silver armour, and just apply a very light dry brush of this across all of the armour, which if done right should catch all of the raised edges, which should give a nice and realistic looking bright highlighted gold. And I'm then going to go in with some Citadel Seraphim Sepia wash, and I'm going to be applying this to most of the model, only I'm going to be trying to push it more towards the recesses. And I can also use this to touch up any of the areas that I overdid it a little bit with the silver dry brush. And this should just add a little bit more depth to the gold colour. And that's all of the metallic armour now finished on all three models. And all that's left to do is paint in any remaining trim. And for the fur coat on the dark steel and blue steel versions, I just use the Army Painter Deep Skin Triad. I'll list the colours I use down below in the description. And just base coated with the darkest colour. And then use the lighter colours to dry brush up the highlights. And fur is another area that really lends itself to the dry brushing technique. Due to all of the recesses and ridges, it just makes it really easy to build up some nice transitions with very little effort. And I'll just use the exact same deep skin tone triad to paint in the horns as well, just working it up to the brightest colours on all of the upward facing surfaces. And for the dark steel version, I applied some rust effects to all of the chains, along with painting in the skull on the back and the handle of the weapon as well. And for the gold version of the model, I painted up the cape using the Army Painter Desaturated Blue-Grey Triad, just following the same process of base coating with the darkest colour, and then using the lighter colours to dry brush up the highlights. And then to finish off the cape on the gold model, I just applied an all-over wash of Army Painter Dark Tone, thinned down 50-50 with some water, which should help it flow a little bit better. And this will just flow into all of the recesses and provide a little bit of extra contrast. And that's the models now complete, with 3 different quick and easy metallic finishes. My personal favourite is the bright silver with the subtle blue tint. That extra step of adding the blue in gives it a really realistic metallic look. And I also kept the basic version of the gold model, where I only applied one dry brush coat, just so I could compare it to the gold with the additional steps. And again, I think the small amount of effort was worth it in this case, as it just gives a much nicer highlighted gold in the end. And as always, a big thank you to all of my Patreon subscribers. All of your support is really appreciated. And don't forget to let me know down in the comments below which one you preferred. And I'll see you in the next one.